my general perspective on social media is that, it's an incredible, miraculous technological tool that we have, and it can be used in so many beautiful ways. And, we've all heard stories of long lost friends connecting through Facebook, people finding relatives, people falling in love, people sharing incredible art projects, people starting political movements. I mean, there's so many great things that we can use social media to do. However, I think we forget sometimes that it is optional, not mandatory to participate. And I think a lot of us have just become so sucked into it that it's like we almost can't imagine a life without it. But I can tell you it is possible to have a life without it. And it might be worth trying, even just temporarily, even just for a week or two. If it creates a shift, the way that you feel and in sort of the noise level in your mind, it certainly did for me to step away.
I'm Claire Barry, and this is the Urban Curiosity Podcast, the show that inspires you to slow down and see things differently. Each week, I talk to interesting urbanites about creativity, human connection, and how to thrive in a city addicted to speed. Hello and welcome to the Urban Curiosity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire Barry, and today I'm thrilled to have Alexandra Franzen on the show. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
So Alexandra is an author, writing coach and communication consultant who works with companies in the health and wellness, fitness and personal development industries. Alex's next book, You're Going to Survive, will be released in autumn 2017. It's a book about criticism, rejection, one-star Amazon reviews, terrible clients, disappointing job interviews, and other discouraging experiences, and how to survive with your sanity and dignity intact. Alex is based in Portland, Oregon, where she lives with her partner, Brandon, and a pet fish named RuPaul. Hi, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
You're welcome. It's great to have you on the show. So tell us about Portland, Oregon. Why do you love it so much?
Portland, Oregon is a very creative, artistic kind of town. There's a lot of people who are running interesting kinds of businesses, doing art projects, things like that. So I love it because it really is a center of creativity in the United States and maybe even the world. And also, as far as medium to large size American cities go, it's still pretty laid back. We don't have a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of hustle and bustle. It's kind of a nice little pocket of the world where it feels lively, but not insanely congested and busy. And that's a really nice balance, I think.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the listeners of this show are interested in is how to thrive in the city. So how do you carve out moments of stillness and quiet in your Portland life?
Something that actually you have inspired me to do more of, Claire, is taking walks with no particular destination in mind.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've been doing much more of that since we first met, actually, and I always think of you when I go. And sometimes I will put on a podcast or some music and I'll just sort of wander around. Sometimes I'll go for a jog, but often I'll just walk. I've also been making more of an effort to walk to somewhere that I do need to be rather than driving, taking an Uber or whatever. Even if it takes me a bit longer, sometimes I look at that as my exercise for the day, or sometimes it's just a way to sort of clear my head at the end of a workday. So walking has been lovely. Other ways to create more stillness in the city. In Portland, we're very blessed because even though it's an urban environment, there's so much nature all around. We have rivers, we have a 5,000-acre urban forest called Forest Park. We have all kinds of walking trails and hiking trails. So while I don't do it as much as maybe I would like, I do try to get to the forest when I can, at least once or twice a month, and just take a long stroll there. And it always feels so good. I never, ever regret going for a walk in the woods.
Fantastic. So is there any particular walk that you like doing that's more in the urban setting of Portland? Is there a favourite walk that you do to just make yourself feel inspired or to feel good?
Yeah, there's a lovely walk. So I live on the east side of Portland. Portland is sort of divided into the west side and then the east side. And the Willamette River runs north to south, dividing both sides. So there's this big, big street called Burnside Street, which basically crosses the entire city practically. So it crosses all the way from the west side to the far east side. So I like to walk down Burnside. It's a really interesting street. It changes as you walk along. It goes on for a couple miles, I think. And midway through, you cross over this wonderful bridge over the river. So sometimes if I want to walk into downtown Portland, I'll just walk all the way down Burnside over the bridge, take a moment to pause on the bridge and look at the view, which is beautiful. And then that carries you into downtown. And I mean, altogether, it's not that far. Like from where I live over the bridge and beyond, it's really only about a 40-minute walk, maybe, but it feels big and you see so much of the city as you go.
That sounds really great. How do you feel about walking slowly rather than power walking to a destination? Does that feel good or feel strange?
Yeah, I would say that I have a fairly slow-ish gait normally, although I've been told that I take very, very long, big steps. People have commented on my stride. Apparently it's very bouncy as well. But yeah, I typically am not like rushing when I walk. If I'm taking a walk, then I want to really walk. And if I'm going for a run, then I want to run. So I'm happy going at a slower pace when I feel like it.
That sounds fantastic. And how about in your neighborhood? Have you found it easy since you moved to that part of town to connect with your community and make new friends?
Yes and no. I will be honest. I was sort of in a unique situation when I moved to Portland because I already had a few friends who lived there, mainly people that I had connected with on the internet. So I had a few clients who were based there. I had a few other people that I knew from sort of the writing and blogging world. So when I arrived, I had sort of a built-in community already, which was very cool. And then, of course, I've made some new friends since I got there. I will say, though, that one thing that I wish I did more often is make an effort to really get to know my neighbors. I think that, it's kind of funny, but like the people who live right across the courtyard from me, I barely know at all, even though there's other people in the city that I know very, very well. So that's really just on me, being kind of a little bit of a hermit and an introvert sometimes and not reaching out. But in general, I would say that people in Portland are quite open and friendly. And, they may not initiate or make the first move, but if you strike up a chat, people will usually be pretty happy to chat with you back.
Great. And what about your daily commute? Do you have one?
My daily commute is basically getting out of bed, walking into the other room, making a coffee, and then walking back into my bedroom and setting up my desk and starting work. That's pretty much it.
Sounds very onerous.
Yeah, it's really, really stressful.
Yeah, I know that a commute is such a feature for many, many urbanites. And I think it's a really, my past experience, and certainly in talking to other podcast guests who've been on the show before you, the commute is such a source of energy drain, potentially. It doesn't have to be, and it's not the case. That's not the case for everybody. Have you got any tips that you could recommend to those people that do have a longer commute than yours?
Yes. So I have lived in other large urban cities. I've lived in Los Angeles, which is, of course, notorious for its traffic and terrible commutes, and I've dealt with all of that. I've also lived in Minneapolis, which, while it's not a particularly trafficy city, it has horrific weather in the winter and snow pileups and other things that can make travel, pretty stressful. So my advice, which honestly I was not always that great at taking myself, is just be prepared. I mean, you've got to look at your daily commute almost as like a little mini road trip or adventure or even vacation that you're taking. And, you want to have the right music on your iPod. You want to have a podcast already downloaded and loaded up. You want to have a snack in your purse or your bag. You've got to sort of prepare yourself for the journey so that it can be enjoyable instead of boring and stressful. For me, whenever I'm stuck in the car for a long while or, riding a metro or whatever, I really love having an audiobook or a podcast or something that can sort of feed my mind and fill the time in an entertaining way. For me, that's a small thing, but it makes a really big difference.
So one of the things that I'm interested in is how we can embrace more the moments in between, the quieter moments in our day that we often tend to fill with entertainment. We reach for our mobile phone and we want the endorphin hit of a new email or a new like or a ping or a ding. And sometimes embracing those boring moments, whether it's on a commute, whether it's in the coffee shop queue or elsewhere, sometimes can really be great opportunities for connection, either making ideas and making connections and sparking ideas in your head, or connecting with a human being and having a brief or extended moment of beautiful human connection. But in order to embrace this, I believe we have to accept and welcome boredom more than most of us are comfortable with. What do you think about boredom and how does it make you feel?
Oh, this is so true, Claire. And I actually read an article recently that used a phrase that I hadn't heard before, but that totally resonated with me. And the phrase is action addiction. And it's the idea that, just like the phrase says, we're all a little bit addicted to the busyness and the activity and sort of the constant feeling that we're either absorbing something or doing something or sending something or texting something, or there's some kind of action happening at all times. And because we're all a little bit addicted to this, it can feel a little weird to just be somewhere without any kind of activity. And funny, I sort of have, like many people, I think, a push-pull feeling with this, because on the one hand, I love, listening to music while I walk and listening to inspiring podcasts and sort of feeding my mind and my soul. And that's great. But then on the other hand, you're right. We do need sometimes to just be quiet and not have a constant, influx of voices or music or beeps or whatever. So one thing that I've actually started to really pay attention to is when I go to a restaurant or a coffee shop, I've noticed that when people sit down, it's like mere seconds before they've whipped out their phone, typically, even if they're having a meal with other people. So I've really made an effort to not do that and to really pay attention, and kind of stop myself if I feel the impulse to reach for my phone out of boredom or loneliness or awkwardness or whatever. And especially if I'm having a meal with other people, to actually turn my phone off or just leave it in my car or just not have it around at all. Or even if I'm having a meal by myself. And I find that that's a nice little moment where I can take in the restaurant, look at the people around, have a real interaction with the server or barista, make them smile maybe, and really engage with my meal and enjoy the meal more. So that's almost like you could look at it as kind of like a walking meditation, sort of like an eating meditation, I guess, where you're really, really present in that moment and appreciating it rather than, munching something while you're sort of scrolling through blah-blah-blue whatever on your screen.
Absolutely. I think also it can make you more satisfied. You're more aware of what your body's telling you about how much more food you may need to eat or not, and how much you enjoyed all of the flavors and just
Totally.
The experience. And certainly with sitting in a group with others who have their smart devices, their mobile devices out, statistically, there's a much higher chance that within a relatively short period of time, everyone around the table is going to have their phone out and be connecting with people who are elsewhere. It's that Sherry Turkle thing, the together alone
right
thing, which looks frankly ridiculous, and yet we're often guilty of it. I have to admit, I try and do exactly what you've said, which is to actually just not have that device available.
Yeah.
Have it switched off in my handbag, or not even have it on my person, whether that's in company or whether it's just, in my own company. So that leads me on to social media. What do you think about social media, both from a business perspective and a life perspective? And before you answer, as somebody who lives in an urban setting where speed can be the default setting that many of us live by.
Ooh, social media. So I, several years ago, actually decided to deactivate all of my social media profiles. So I don't use any social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, no LinkedIn, no Snapchat, no nothing anymore. And my reasons for doing that were, I took kind of a hard look at my life, and I was looking at where my time and energy was going. And I was looking at, what felt meaningful to me versus what felt fun, but maybe a little bit of a distraction or a little bit of mental clutter or noise. And I just decided to temporarily stop using social media for one summer to see if it made a difference in my life, to see if I felt better. And I discovered that I really did. So I decided to make it a more permanent hiatus. And, I'm kind of a never say never type of person. So, maybe someday I'll decide to use it again in some way or another. But for now, I don't. And my general perspective on social media is that, it's an incredible, miraculous technological tool that we have, and it can be used in so many beautiful ways. And, we've all heard stories of long lost friends connecting through Facebook, people finding relatives, people falling in love, people sharing incredible art projects, people starting political movements. I mean, there's so many great things that we can use social media to do. However, I think we forget sometimes that it is optional, not mandatory to participate. And I think a lot of us have just become so sucked into it that it's like we almost can't imagine a life without it. But I can tell you it is possible to have a life without it. And it might be worth trying, even just temporarily, even just for a week or two. If it creates a shift, the way that you feel and in sort of the noise level in your mind, it certainly did for me to step away.
That's a really inspiring story. And just tell our listeners how that impacted your business, making that decision.
Yeah, that was actually quite a big concern of mine was, hey, if I stop tweeting, if I stop doing Instagram, et cetera, because I had built up, I would say, not a massive following, but a sizable following. I worried that if I wasn't present on social media, everyone would sort of forget about me, or no one would hire me again, or no one would want to come to my workshops or whatever. And what I found, and I can't speak for every type of business, of course, I can only speak for my own, but what I found was that nothing bad happened. I still had my core group of clients who love me and hire me regularly and, sent referrals to me through word of mouth, which is what has always happened. I still maintain my newsletter, which is pretty much my, the primary way that I communicate with my clients and customers and other people who sort of enjoy my writing. So I kept that alive. And then I just sort of switched to sort of more of emails and things like that. And everything just sort of carried along. In fact, I think my mailing list audience has actually grown quite a bit since I went off social media. So I think what ended up happening was I just sort of shifted the energy, and rather than connecting with people, on 4 or 5 different places, I just sort of invited everyone to gather in one place, which was my mailing list, and I focused my energy there. And so far it seems to be working out just fine. I haven't, really experienced any negative impact with my own business.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So speaking about energy, I'm really curious about what you do in those moments, on those days that we all have where you're struggling with overwhelm. What do you do, apart from maybe going out to your beautiful wooded area for a lovely stroll? What other tips and techniques can you recommend that work for you to help you just come back to the present moment and feel calm and less overwhelmed?
Oh my gosh, I had a moment like this earlier this week. It was bleak. I was feeling very, very overwhelmed. For me, what helps me to deal with overwhelm, overwhelm is usually around my work. It's a feeling of, I just have a few too many projects going on, or I'm feeling like everything's taking a bit longer than I thought it would, and I feel like I'm falling behind, and those kinds of feelings feel so stressful for me. So I like to really get back to basics when I feel that sort of heavy, suffocating feeling coming in. So getting back to basics for me means, making sure that I'm making time to at least eat, a nutritious meal a couple times a day, drinking plenty of water. I also love to look at my calendar and just really eliminate absolutely everything that doesn't absolutely need to be there, and just kind of strip things down to give myself a little more breathing room as much as I can. One thing I've started doing pretty regularly is at night before I go to bed, and this isn't a revolutionary idea, but it really helps me. Before I go to bed, I make a list of just like 2 or 3 important things that I definitely need to handle or achieve the next day. And that way I can go to sleep, I have sort of peace of mind. I wake up and I see my list and I don't have sort of that morning fog moment of like, what am I doing today? So that really helps me to stay in sort of a creative, flowing, productive state rather than wasting time trying to remember what it is that I was supposed to do first and second and whatnot. So really just all of those kinds of basic, I guess you could look at it as sort of self-care in a way, really does help to lift that fog of overwhelm a bit for me.
Brilliant. I really, really, really think those are some great tips for people to use. Do you meditate, Alex?
I don't meditate in the sense of sitting on a pillow cross-legged and closing my eyes and whatnot. However, I look at meditation as really just doing any kind of activity where you are fully engaged in that activity. So it sounds kind of funny, but when I'm cleaning my apartment or like tidying up or making the bed or doing laundry or whatever, I actually look at that as a form of meditation because that's usually a time when things are very quiet, my partner is out of the house, and I can really just sort of move from room to room and breathe and do something that's, sort of active, but sort of pleasantly mindless in a way too, and just really be there in that moment. So yeah, I think that walking can be a form of meditation, of course. I think cooking can be a form of meditation. Anything where you're just really there instead of divided into, 3 different places at once.
Excellent. So coming back to Portland, is there a favourite hidden gem that you would be prepared to share with our audience when they are next in Portland?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I know the perfect spot. So a place just opened fairly recently, actually, called Knot Springs. I think it's Knot, maybe 2 T's.
Right.
So this is basically an urban spa kind of thing. But what's really cool about it is that you can buy a day pass and then you have access to these amazing showers and changing rooms with all these like delicious, yummy exfoliating products and whatnot. And you can soak in their mineral soaking pools. And they have like a really hot pool, a medium pool, a cold pool, a sauna, a dry sauna, a wet sauna, et cetera, et cetera. And you can really just spend hours kind of dipping from pool to pool. And what's really lovely about this space is that it's located like right in the center of the city. And you sort of wouldn't expect it. Like you look at this big building and you think, there's mineral pools in there? What? And once you're inside, you have this beautiful view of downtown Portland and the river. So it's like this very urban looking space. And yet once you're inside, you feel just transported and it's so peaceful and blissful and it's a lovely place to soak and watch the sunset. So if you're ever in Portland, I would say go to Knot Springs. You can take a yoga class and then you can soak in all the pools and you will feel amazing.
Oh my goodness, that sounds absolutely delicious. I'm definitely coming to Portland to check that place out.
Let's go together.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. So Alex, tell us a bit more about your upcoming book. You're Going to Survive.
Oh, thank you for asking. So You're Going to Survive was actually born out of an experience that I had about 1.5 years ago, where in addition to being a writer and writing teacher, I also helped my partner Brandon to open a restaurant. And
wow.
That was, a very exciting and also kind of tumultuous and challenging experience, as anyone who's worked in the restaurant industry knows. It's a little bit crazy to pull something like that together. So we had this experience that, now looking back feels very funny, but at the time was not very funny. We got our very first really, really harshly negative Yelp review.
Oh.
Yeah. So we had a customer come in and she just hated it, for whatever reason. She didn't like the food. She thought it was, too rich. She didn't like the flavors. Her kids didn't like it. But she just had all kinds of complaints. And at this time, up until that point, we had really only gotten very positive feedback. So I remember reading that harsh review, and I just really felt heartbroken about it. And, as much as I try to, sort of have a sense of equanimity and I try not to take anything too personally, for some reason, this really hit my gut and it bothered me. And it also bothered me because I wondered, why is this affecting me so much? Why can't I just shake this off and move on? This one little review shouldn't be rattling my self-esteem like this. And I began, because of that experience, to get really curious about criticism and rejection and discouragement, especially as it relates to our careers and our businesses. And I started to interview people, and I asked every single person that I interviewed, can you tell me a story about a time when you felt so criticized and discouraged, and what happened, and how did you deal with it, and what did you learn, and how did you survive? And I ended up gathering together about 40 different stories from my own career and from many other people's, and I compiled them into a book, and the message is really baked into the title. I want to make people kind of laugh and breathe and remember that all of the setbacks that we experience in our careers and in our lives are, for the most part, survivable, and you're not going to die. You are going to be okay. And often these experiences that feel so awful in the moment can wind up really being a wonderful lesson or a gift or opportunity later down the line. So that's what the book is about.
Wow, I can't wait to read it. You'll have to come back and talk to us when the book's out and available for us to read and reflect and discuss.
Aw, thanks.
That's really inspiring. So thank you so much, Alex. One last question I ask all of our guests is, what are you most curious about right now and why?
Ooh, what am I curious about? This is so funny. The very first thing that popped into my mind is Miami, because I've always wanted, for whatever reason, to visit the city of Miami. I think I have sort of a fantasy or vision of what I think it is in my mind, just sort of like palm trees and margaritas and rollerblading and, I don't know what, tiny shorts or something. But I've recently gotten really, really, really into Latin pop music, and there's obviously a ton of that happening over there. So I want to learn more about Miami and maybe book a trip there at some point this year, maybe to celebrate my birthday. We'll see.
Sounds good. Alex, thanks so much for being on the Urban Curiosity podcast today. Where can people find out more about your work and your upcoming book?
My work is all at my website, which is alexandrafranzen.com. It's just my name. There's info about my various books there. There's a newsletter. There's lots of articles to read and cool things. So pop by and check it out if you like.
Fantastic. Alex, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Urban Curiosity podcast. Get the show notes and more at urbancuriosity.co.uk/podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring, please head on over to iTunes now and subscribe. If the stories and ideas in the show moved you, please leave a review or a 5-star rating. Until next time, remember this: a curious life is an extraordinary life. I'm Claire Barry, signing off for Urban Curiosity.